Hello, it's Kylie with Fim and Flow. I hope everyone's having a great day. Today's episode is called Shifting to the Fifth Density. So, I not only want to talk about this, but I'm also going to go over the 9 different dimensions or densities that we currently are accessing energetically, and I'll talk about what that means. So, have you heard about Earth shifting to the fifth dimension and wondered what that means exactly? Today, I'll explain the dimensions that we can currently access and what we need to do for humanity to successfully shift into the fifth density. Our physical body currently is in the third density, which is ruled by linear space and time. And then we are also impacted by the fourth density, which is non physical. And the fourth density impacts all dimensions below 3D. So it impacts the first dimension, the second dimension, and the third dimension. The first through third densities are physical realms and they are measurable. And then the fourth through ninth densities are non physical and operate as subtle frequencies in 3D. Being in the third density, we are most aware of the other physical dimensions, the first dimension, second, and third, but we can access energy from 9 dimensions. But then in total, there are 27 dimensions. And these 27 dimensions have been talked about in quantum physics. This is an interesting topic to talk about because we mainly all remember this current experience in this 3D life. And some of us may not even realize the impact the fourth dimension has on us, which is a non physical density. But once I talk about it, you will understand how it is impacting our lives. Well, I believe there's aspects of each dimension that span all 27 dimensions and they interact with each other in this layered effect. For example, right now we're actually experiencing energy and aspects of 9 of the dimensions, and you may not even realize it. But when I talk more about each dimension, you'll start to pick up on what I'm talking about and it'll make more sense. And then when I talked about how there's aspects of each dimension that impact each other, there's also aspects of each dimension that is just unique to that one dimension and that one frequency band that that dimension is operating in. And this will make more sense as I keep talking about it as well. So I'll talk about this layered effect for a moment. Like I mentioned, we can currently access energies from 9 of the dimensions, and the non physical dimensions operate as subtle frequencies in 3D. This is what I mean by that. We just need to access these energies. And when I talk about each dimension, I'll talk about how we can access those energies. Think about a radio. All the radio stations are out there layered together as frequencies. And then we use our radio and we just have to tune in to the certain frequency that we want to pick up for the sound to come through clearly. So think about it like that. All of those frequencies of those 9 dimensions are out there, and we need to do certain things energetically that tune us and pull that energy into our reality. I've mentioned a few times, humanity is in 3D, but we're accessing energy from dimensions 1 through 9. And then when humanity raises its frequency to a higher frequency band and it stabilizes it there, that's how humanity will shift into the fifth dimension. And like a radio station, when you tune to one frequency, you don't hear the other stations unless you start to get too close to the other frequency waves. Then, once you start to get close to those other frequency waves, you might start to have some interference or some static, or you might hear some songs from a radio station with the frequency next to it. So, since these dimensions are on different frequency bands, humanity currently in 3D won't usually see beings inhabiting those other dimensions because those other dimensions are on another frequency band. To put this in a real life example, did you hear about the Miami alien incident? This is what I think happened there. I think because Earth and humanity is in the process of shifting to 5D, we're getting closer to the 5D frequency bands. And like a radio station, some static started happening, and we started getting some static or some music from that next channel. This is why you heard people talk about that they saw these interdimensional beings and they seemed to have no clue they were walking through a Miami mall or that beings in another dimension could even see them. I don't think they were even at a mall in their dimension. They weren't thinking, oh, let's go explore this Earth Miami mall. They were just living in their reality, but because dimensions are all layered on each other, since we are nearing that 5D frequency band, that's why we could see a piece of that dimension. Like in that area, the dimensional veil was falling. But let's back up a little bit because do you remember in 2012, there was a lot of talk about the world ending or the ending of the Mayan calendar? So I want to talk about this a moment. So I believe that was just the ushering in of a new age, this age of Aquarius, which is really focused on unveiling the truth of it all. And then before that was the age of Pisces. So 2012 was the beginning of this new age, the new transition into the age of Pisces, into the age of Aquarius. And now we're hitting the peak energy of the age of Aquarius. And all of this crazy stuff happening around us energetically and in our society, all of this crazy stuff happening in our society right now is part of this big energetic shift of this heightened age of Aquarius that we're in. So don't be afraid of all of this happening. It's actually going to be really, really good. But I believe that before 2012, while humans in 3D could access energies through the ninth dimension, we couldn't do it as well as we can now. And then in 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar and this bringing in of the new age of Aquarius, this brought in higher frequencies and humanity could better access. And like I mentioned before, there's actually 27 dimensions that we know of, but there's 9 that we can access energetically. So around 2012, view this as the high frequency energy got dialed up. And that's actually similar to what's happening right now. We're hitting this peak age of Aquarius energy, and this high frequency energy is just getting dialed up and up in our reality. I started writing some notes about this podcast and the 9 different dimensions. And I was reading this other book by Barbara Hanclow, and it was talking about the age of Aquarius and how when these big transition periods come, there's a sudden leap forward in human evolution. It talks about how these sudden leap forwards in human evolution are caused by a huge increase in cosmic rays that reached Earth from a binary star system that is close to the crossing point of the Northern Cross near Deneb. This star system, Cygnus X3, is one of the brightest sources of high-energy gamma rays in our galaxy. Since 1980, scientists have been detecting periodic cosmic rays coming from Cygnus X3 that they call cygnets, which stands for little swans. It talks about how mysteriously these jets sometimes aim at Earth, sending high-energy cosmic particles our way. Carl Sagan proposed that cosmic rays trigger human evolution, and mysteriously, Cygnus X3 has been active for around 700,000 years, the time frame for the evolution of mammals. That doesn't sound like a coincidence to me. It seems very purposeful, and that might explain how at these different periods in time that the high frequency energy really gets dialed up. Like I mentioned, while in 3D, the higher dimensions, 4D through 9D are non physical and operate as subtle frequencies, and we experience these non physical realms in different ways. In my last podcast episode, I talk about how there's clearly some dark force that's running the globe, and you can call this the global elite. That's what I'll refer to it in this episode. But talking about the dimension, specifically when I start talking about the fourth dimension, this shows exactly how they do this. And we'll talk about how we can get away from this control. The fourth density is the world of archetypes, myths, and thought forms. And like I mentioned before, it is a non physical realm. And you can view this as if you think about our physical 3D reality that we're living in, think about the fourth dimension as a veil or a canopy that's layered over the third dimension. The fourth dimension is the realm of the human collective mind, or some call it the collective consciousness. The collective consciousness is the combination of individual thoughts and feelings that meld and weave into archetypal patterns that connect all of humanity. This dimension holds all memory of humanity's events. When you hear people talk about the matrix or the false matrix or escaping the matrix, this is the fourth density they are actually referring to. This global elite group that I just mentioned and that I talked about in my last podcast, they have figured out how to harness control of this fourth dimension and thereby controlling the thought forms, archetypes, and swaying the collective consciousness in ways that benefit them. Step back and think about it. It's so clear that mainstream media, movies, music, Hollywood influence, etc., are all methods of propaganda and programming. And while 3D is physical and 4D is non physical, think how real your emotions and your thoughts feel to you. Sometimes they actually feel more powerful and more real than your actual 3D being. I talk about this so much, but our emotions all have unique frequencies, and these emotional frequencies are how we create our own reality. If we aren't in control of our emotions and aware of how this all works, then we can fall prey to the 4D program that has been hijacked by the global elite. And if you aren't in tune with this and in tune with yourself and in tune with your own emotions, falling prey to the 4D program doesn't look very extreme. In fact, it looks like mainstream culture. It looks like the Billboard Top 100 streaming through your radio, going to the hottest concerts, gossiping about the latest reality TV episode, and getting emotional about the latest tragedy the news channel is reporting on. But the good news is, all it takes to see past this 4D program is getting in touch with your inner guidance, seeking God within, being a sovereign being, turning off mainstream media, and aligning and getting in touch with your authentic self. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. I talk about this a lot and have done another podcast on it, but we need to regulate our nervous system so we are fully in control of our emotions and we can truly step back when things are going on and we can just truly be the observer and not be pushing our emotional energy towards the situation. Because when we push our emotional energy towards a situation, that idea will keep being created in our reality. When it comes down to it, we need to regulate our nervous system so we fully control our emotional responses and our reactions, turn off mainstream media and those influences, and go within. The global elite definitely know how this all works, and they want our nervous system dysregulated so they can control us with this fourth density programming. They even can stage trauma events that will get us in our fight or flight response, and then they can use that energy for their own agenda. When we're in our fight or flight response and sending them that energy, we're not using our energy to create the reality we desire. This is also why pharmaceuticals are pushed, antidepressants and stimulants and ADHD medication. The use of these medications are rampant in our society. This is also why our food industry is a total joke. We have an extreme sugar problem, a huge processed food issue, and our Western diet severely lacks vitamins and minerals. It's all for a reason, and part of that reason is to keep our nervous system dysregulated so they can cause these fight or flight responses out of us, and they can use the fourth dimension to program what they want us to feel, think, and what they want to happen because they're not their creators. We are the creator beings. They're just trying to control the thought forms they're putting out. So we believe that, grasp onto it, and that we don't even realize that we are the ones creating that play that they want played out. I mentioned this in my last episode too. They don't have any of the power. We have all of the power. We are the ones that can use our high positive, high vibe energy to create a blissful world that we want. They've used this fourth density program and how it's all set up with archetypes, thought forms in the collective mind. They've hijacked it so we don't even believe or see our own divinity. So as soon as we wake up to this, we can pull our power back and they cannot do anything because, like I said, they can't even sustain themselves because they are not connected to source energy or God. They have to get that from us. So we can wake up to this, and when we are the observer and when we know how to manage our emotions and manage our energy, we can keep that energy to ourselves and they can't harness it for their own agenda. So within this 4D program and the archetypes we have in our society and this collective mind, they've put different thoughts and different mechanisms in there in the programming. To be balanced human beings living in harmony, we need to be pulling energy from all 9 dimensions. This is why I talk about in previous episodes how we want to align with our higher selves, do our hobbies and our passions, and live our full expression and be in our soul's purpose and mission, because when we do all of these things, we're pulling in our full energetic blueprint. I also talk about how there's this higher version of ourself living in the higher dimensions. And they aren't separate from God. They are directly connected to source. They know it all. They have much more knowledge and insight than we have, because when we came into 3D, that 4D veil or programming actually caused this illusion of separation that we experience here. That is not something innately part of the third or fourth dimension. That was part of this false matrix that this global elite put over us. And quantum entanglement is a way of explaining this and explaining how we can have a higher self and this version of us. So we have that higher version of us that's fully connected to source and has much more knowledge and insight that we have. So we want to be tapping into that connected to God version of us and pulling that energy into the third dimension. Because when we pull in that energy, it's very, very high frequency, because obviously pulling in that energy of our true energetic blueprint that is our higher self, that's pulling in very high frequency into this third dimension. So I think beings in dimensions 5 through 9, which would be the higher self version of us, they're all living in the same reality, but they are experiencing their reality differently. And actually, they are experiencing it however they prefer and whatever is most blissful for them. So here, like I mentioned, that the dimensions are layered on top of each other. 5 through 9 are all layered over each other in the same reality, if that makes sense. For example, you and me, we could be in the fifth through ninth dimension, and we could be having lunch or doing an activity. And if I prefer how the fifth dimension feels and you prefer how the sixth dimension feels, then we could still be having lunch together and I'm vibrating at the fifth dimensional frequency band and you're vibrating at the sixth dimensional frequency band. It's literally whatever we prefer to experience in that very moment. The beings in the fifth through ninth dimension are always in bliss and experiencing whatever they enjoy. So, in this way, you can really compare this to what we call heaven. And like I mentioned, the third dimension where we occupy now, we're under this false matrix control currently. So even if we weren't under this false matrix, 3D beings wouldn't be living in the same reality as the beings in the fifth through ninth dimension, simply because 3D is fully physical and it's just a different experience. And earlier, when I talked about how there's some aspects that span all 27 dimensions, but then there's some aspects that are unique to the specific dimension, here's an example of that. I said the third dimension is linear time and space. So this is the aspect that spans all 9 dimensions. But time acts differently in the other dimensions, but I won't get into that. But just because an aspect does span all 9 dimensions, it might not take on the same properties or act the same way in all of the dimensions. But then an aspect of the third dimension that is purely unique to this dimension is the duality and polarity that we have here. Duality being black and white, right versus wrong, and then polarity being the shades of gray, that gradient in between what we would consider good and bad. And really, we want to totally get away from thinking in dualities. We want to have that empathetic perspective and understand that situations are not black and white. There's a lot of gray there. The global elite wants to trap us into thinking in these dualities because when we think in duality and we think in black and white, it causes strife and causes us to point fingers and say, I'm right, you're wrong. And that causes these low frequency vibrations. We want to be living in love and understanding each other and work on understanding where someone else is coming from and understand their perspective and why they may have made a choice that they made. The fourth dimension control layers on these archetypes to play out this duality aspect. If you notice, the news really wants us to fall into this duality trap and they really push one narrative and want us to get really emotional about that one side and really support that other side and point fingers and call the other side terrible. We saw this recently in the mainstream media really push and play out Israel versus Palestine when we're faced with these archetypal dualistic situations. It's not that we shouldn't have an opinion or that we shouldn't say our side, but we really need to understand both perspectives and we can't just listen to what the news is spewing at us because it's so clear they just want to get an emotional response from us. And I've talked about it a lot that when we put emotion towards a situation, it's putting an emotional frequency out that's causing that to create that situation in our reality. So we really want to step back and just be an observer. And we can have an opinion, but we cannot let our emotions get the best of us. We need to have a regulated nervous system so when these things come up, we can step back, observe, have an opinion, but you can definitely have an opinion without tying an emotional response to it. Now I'm going to get into discussing the densities 1 through 9, how we can pull in energy from these dimensions, and how the 4D program has attempted to prevent us from pulling in these other dimensional energies. The global elite doesn't want us accessing and pulling in these higher dimensional energies because then we are sovereign and not under their 4D program control. Something else that is really interesting is even though I said the first through third dimension is physical and the fourth through ninth is non physical, in the third dimension, we used to have a carbon based body, but now we've evolved into a silica based body, and we're clearly completely physical. Then, even though dimensions 5 through 9 are non physical, we can actually choose in the moment if we want to be in our light body or if we want to manifest as physical. And if we manifest in physical, our body is crystalline based. So now we'll get into the dimensions. And you'll notice that through this episode, I use the word dimension and density interchangeably. So the first dimension is Earth's iron crystal core. The first dimension is the most dense, and the dimensions get less dense as we move up through the 27th density. Gravity spans all of the dimensions, but the Earth's solid iron core is what holds or stabilizes gravity into place. To be healthy, our 3D bodies need to be pulsing along with Earth, and this is why we have iron in our blood. Health issues arise when we don't have the proper amount of iron in our blood. And in current times, many women are very iron deficient. We know that red meat contains a lot of iron, and it's really interesting that this global elite has been pushing the narrative that cattle highly contribute to global warming, that red meat is unhealthy, plant-based fake meat is being pushed, and the vegan agenda is really, really being pushed these days. And I'll touch on this again when we talk about the second dimension because that has to do with minerals. I've seen this other places, but I completely agree. It's just funny that the global elite really push that cattle highly contribute to global warming, but then they all fly their huge private jets to the economic forum to discuss all of this. We just need to have logical thinking and think critically because when we do that, a lot of this nonsense really comes to the surface. I've also talked a lot about how grounding is really important to us and we can raise our vibration in this way. And this first dimensional energy is why. Grounding and putting our bare feet or other body parts helps us align with this first dimensional energy. Not only does this help us sync up with this earth pulse, but it also absorbs low vibrational energy and transmutes it into high vibrational energy. So this is the layout I'll use. I'll just briefly talk about the dimension and then I'll talk about how the global elite uses strategies to try and stop us from accessing and pulling in these other dimensional energies. The second dimension is Earth's outer core, which is the magma core. This is the dimension that seismic activity, energy that causes weather patterns and natural disasters, energy portals, energy vortexes, minerals, and the elementals are. And one of the ways this dimension really impacts our 3D body is because we really need to be properly mineralized so we pulse along with Earth. And I touched on it already, but not only are we being led to not eat in the correct way that will properly give us the minerals and vitamins we need, our food industry is a complete joke. There's so many processed foods that are being marketed towards kids that have zero nutritional value. Water is a huge source of minerals, but even our water supply is completely stripped. And not only is it stripped, but it's full of toxins like fluoride. And they're telling us that we need fluoride for our teeth, but I don't believe that. You can do your own research on that. Another thing that's absolutely crazy to me is how our culture accepts and pushes alcohol. Alcohol is such a part of our society. People go to happy hours after work, and it's interesting that you have to explain yourself more when you're not drinking than if you do drink. It's kind of just assumed that everyone drinks, and when you don't, people ask, "Oh, why don't you drink?" And you have to explain yourself. It's just really interesting and really crazy that society has accepted it to that level. And you really have to ask yourself, okay, everyone's pretty clear and agrees that alcohol is not good for us and that alcohol causes people to act in ways they're not proud of. Why is this something that we have to explain if we don't partake in it? That's just one of those logical things that you're like, "What? This doesn't make sense." We need to critically think about this and need to acknowledge how weird that is and how it actually is kinda crazy that alcohol use is so popular in our society and there's such a culture around it. Alcohol strips our body of magnesium, and magnesium is so, so important to our brain and our body. I mentioned how the global elite pushes veganism, but billionaires like Bill Gates are also buying up tons of farmland. And think about it, if you control the farmland, you control the food supply. We need to live in harmony with Earth and the first and second dimensions. We're supposed to use some of Earth's resources, but when we use too many, and especially when we exploit Earth's resources for profit, we're certainly out of harmony with the first and the second dimensions, and this is when we will see seismic activity and natural disasters. And this is not the wrath of God, it's simply the balancing of Earth's energies. We can absolutely live in harmony with Earth and not have these huge balancing of energies occur. Crystals, aside from Earth's solid iron core, are part of the second dimension as well. Crystals store energy in the way of magnifying or absorbing certain energies depending on the type of crystal. The global elite know this, and this is one of the ways they run the programs in the fourth dimension. They store thought forms in the crystals in Earth, and these crystals refract and radiate these thought forms, and we pick up on that unknowingly. For this reason, it's actually good to harvest crystal from Earth, cleanse and charge them by putting them in salt water under the sun or the moonlight, and then use them for your own positive uses. Crystals can be a very useful tool for pulling and anchoring in second dimensional energies. Just make sure you cleanse and charge your crystals regularly. The global elite attempt to repress this knowledge, one, by using religion fear tactics to condemn people who use crystals, and then two, push the narrative that using crystals is woo woo and not backed by science. They really try to push shame towards people who use crystals. Then I mentioned energy portals and energy vortexes. Earth also has these natural portals and vortexes that are part of the second density. We can raise our vibration just by going to these potent energy portals. Some of these portals are located in Sedona, Bali, Egypt, and Hawaii. Being around these potent energy portals can even magnetize and multiply your manifestations and the vibes you're putting out. The global elite are very aware of these portals and have been for centuries. In some areas, they have harnessed this potent energy for global control. They will build buildings on these portals. And one example of this is the Vatican. The Roman Catholic Church uses this to push their narrative for control. The pyramids in Egypt were also built on energy portals, but this was used for the good of humanity, not evil control. So those are a few ways that the global elite have tried to deter us from pulling in these second dimensional energies, but there are some easy things we can do to pull this energy in. Swimming in the ocean is really powerful. Salt water is important because it's filled with so many minerals. Definitely make sure your body is properly mineralized. And I talk about on other podcasts ways to get minerals. I really like Celtic sea salt. I take these water and wellness salt water capsules. And I also am really particular about getting filtered, clean water with minerals added back in. Or you could drink natural spring water. Another way, just visit these known energy portals, and while you're there, be very mindful of your intention of why you're there and be high vibe and put out good thoughts. And another really important thing is just to get in touch with nature, go outside, be in the sunlight, be very mindful while you're on walks, and just send out good vibes. Now I'm going to talk about the third dimension. And the third dimension is where humanity and other biological life currently occupy. That's where we are now. The third dimension is linear time and space. So, this dimension of linear time and space allows us to use our past as a reference point to make decisions in the present moment, and we can plan our future off of this as well. And like I mentioned, some aspects of each dimension span all 27 dimensions, and then some aspects are just specific to the current dimension. In linear time and space impacts all 27 dimensions, but it acts differently in all dimensions. For example, linear time and space works differently in the third dimension than it does in dimensions 5 through 9. This is the dimension where the physical and non physical realms meet because we're physical in the third dimension, but also, like I've talked about, the fourth dimension is impacting us, and it's like a canopy around the third dimension and is the dimension of archetypes and myths and the collective thought. And if we don't realize how the fourth dimension works, then it greatly, greatly impacts us in the third dimension by putting these thought forms in our head. And if we don't wake up and become aware of how the fourth dimension impacts us, then we'll be greatly influenced and led by these thought forms and fall into these archetypal patterns. With the 4D influence, 3D literally becomes the physical manifestation of playing out fairy tales. I believe that when all of this was first started, the third dimension is somewhere we would come for fun, where it's like we're coming into the physical and we're playing out these fairy tales. And you can definitely look at it as the game analogy. Like you're coming into this game and playing out these different stories of all of these archetypes and myths that we have in our society and that are running in the fourth dimension. But then, like I mentioned, the dark global elite that we have running the show in the third dimension found a way to basically hijack the fourth dimension. So all of the archetypes, myths, and thought forms that are put out are exactly what they want to play out in a way to control humanity in the third dimension. So they can play off our energy, cause us to be fearful of certain ideas, certain thoughts, really fall into the belief of these different archetypes and myths, and they control us with fear and manipulation. And the basis of manipulation is guilt. So, really let that all sink in. Think about this for a second. If you look through all of the different belief systems that we have around the globe and the different religions, a lot of the archetypal setup of these, the base template of these different beliefs and different religion, actually all boil down to the same archetypal story. The stories have different characters. And that's just a product of how this 3D and 4D dimension works. 3D is us playing it out in physical, but 4D is that archetypal influence. So that archetypal influence is setting up these paradigms and these patterns and these templates. And then based on our perception, based on our perspective we have, that really boils down to the culture, how we were raised, where we were raised in the world. That's going to be the lens we then play out these archetypal patterns in. In other words, where we grow up and the culture we grow up in completely influences which of these archetypes that we believe is truth. And then, like I mentioned, 3D is the dimension of duality and polarity. And I mentioned duality is black and white, and then polarity is the gradient. And this is an aspect just specific to the third dimension. It doesn't span the other dimensions. It's unique to this experience. So when we were raised in a certain archetypal pattern and we are personifying this energy in a specific way, we fall into this trap of duality when we say, no, my belief is right and yours is wrong. That's why we need to not fall into this trap of duality and instead be in this polarity where we don't believe in black and white. We look at the pattern of these different archetypal beliefs and we find what all of these different patterns have in common. This third dimension and fourth dimension, the land of fairy tales and myths, it was supposed to be fun. When this was all started, it was supposed to be a very, very fun experience because think of how fun this would be if we didn't have this dark influence of control. We'd be exploring this physical dimension, literally like we're in this game, with these archetypes and these myths and these stories playing out. It would be very, very fun. But then, like I mentioned, it was hijacked. But a little more about how this dimension works. Quantum physics explains how this reality works, and from there we can derive how we create our own reality while we're here. We use linear time and space to create our reality. We're creating our future in the present by putting off these emotional vibrations, these emotional frequencies, and we're creating based off what experiences we've had in the past. That's why the concept of time is important. And I talk about it a lot, how we do create our reality here based on quantum physics. Our bodies are electromagnetic, and everything in this reality and universe is all energy, frequency, and vibration. When we have an emotion, each emotion has its own unique frequency, and you can look this up on the Hawkins map of consciousness. Our energy is set up in a toroidal field or a toroidal flow, and that's a donut-shaped energy field around us. When we have an emotion, it radiates a specific emotional frequency, and that goes out into the quantum field, and like attracts like, the same frequencies connect and attract, and there's endless outcomes out in the quantum field. So our emotional frequency goes out, connects to a frequency of the same vibration, and that is then pulled back into our energy field, and that's how outcomes are created in our reality. So that's why I talk so much about how we need to be completely in charge of our emotions, because that's what's sending out that emotional charge of frequency that will then be used to create our reality. And that's how this global elite uses us to create what they want to happen. They put out these thought forms to us through music, TV, all of the mainstream media. and use the fourth dimension to put all of these ideas out there so we pick up on them and we're the ones who are manifesting this into reality. And there's a part of reality that's influenced by the collective consciousness. So that's on a big level. And then there's a portion of our reality that is just impacted by our own individual beliefs and what we are individually manifesting. Because you can see madness going on around you, but you can still be in a really happy, abundant, enlightened spot, even with craziness going on around you. That's how the two play to each other. And we want to be the example of what we want to see in the world. And you've probably heard that before, and there's a reason that is said a lot. And the global elite clearly know how this reality works and how the emotional thoughts we have, how the emotions we have will manifest and create their reality. They know this, so they've hid this truth from us. They don't want us to realize how reality creation works and what the fourth dimension is, because they want to use the collective mind and our power to run the programs and create the scenarios and our outcomes that suit them best and that will keep them in control. It's all programmed in the fourth dimension, and then it plays out in the physical and the third dimension. And I mentioned in my last podcast, and I believe I mentioned it here, that this global elite that is running this show, they have no true power. They're not connected to God. They're not connected to source energy. So that's why they have to manipulate us, because we're the powerful ones connected, and we're the only ones that can manifest and create reality in this way. So they rely on us to stay blind to this truth. So we really need to wake up to this truth, wake up to how these dimensions work, and take our power back. We need to realize our power and step into our true divinity and realize that we connect to God. We're connected to source energy from within, and it's not an outside thing we need to seek out. God is not some outside man sitting in the clouds that we need to please and worship. We're all connected to God, and we need to seek God from within and connect to our own intuition. And we need to use this power to raise our vibes, raise our emotional frequencies, live in those high emotional states of enlightenment, happiness, joy, abundance, love. We need to live in those high vibration emotions. So that's what we're putting out there, and that's what we're creating our reality based on. Once we realize this, we can stop letting the fourth dimensional influences impact us, because it doesn't have to control us. And once we do this, we can be sovereign beings and really step into creating the reality that we wish and that we desire and that will be the most blissful for us. And we just need to use these quantum physics principles to do this. And that's also why I talk on and on endlessly about how we need to heal our nervous system so we don't go into those fight or flight responses. And we need to be able to be the observer and separate our thoughts from our emotions. Because some people think when you have a thought, it is automatically tied to an emotional response, but that's just not true. You can definitely have an opinion and a thought about something without putting any emotions towards that. So that's what healing your nervous system will end up doing. It allows us to truly step back, be the observer, and be fully in control of our emotions. I also think one of the thought forms this global elite puts out there is that thoughts do equal emotions. And like I mentioned already, they do a lot of things to keep our nervous system dysregulated. All of this is packaged together, an important part of them remaining in control. So we need to wake up. We need to wake up from this and realize the truth. So now we will get into discussion of the fifth dimension. And I mentioned this already, but dimensions 4 through 9 are non physical, but in the fifth through ninth dimension, you have a crystalline body, and you can choose in the moment if you want to manifest in the physical or as your light body. I got some inspiration to do this podcast on the different dimensions and how the global elite are influencing us by using the power of the fourth dimension. And then after I started thinking about this more, I was certainly divinely led to a specific book, and it's called The Alchemy of the Nine Dimensions, and it's by Barbara Handclough. This next part is from her book. The fifth dimension is a realm of light that centers in the human heart. For humans, the light's vibrational frequency is called samadhi, the realizable human experience of communication with the divine. Even though when I talked about the third dimension, I said it was never supposed to be that we had this illusion of separation in the third dimension, we were still supposed to understand our divinity and how we are powerful creators and how this reality and the creation of our own reality works. There is still more separation than there is in the fifth dimension because, like I talked about, this third dimension with fourth dimensional overlay is supposed to be like this fun experience or fun game we go into to experience this land of fairy tales. But then you can view the fifth dimension as where truth really is unveiled, and we realize our full connection with God, and we are fully stepped into that divine essence. We, in the fifth dimension, we truly understand love and how love is the basis for our entire universe, and how love is God and love is source energy. And in the fifth dimension, we understand how this all works and how this is all tied together. Since we love archetypes so much in this third dimension, you can really view the fifth dimension as heaven. But I also mentioned how the dimensions 5 through 9 are all layered together. And if you're living in that reality, all beings that are operating in those four dimensions are all living the same reality, but they can choose which frequency band they want to operate in to experience that specific dimension. Kind of hard to understand, but once you get it, I think it clicks. So therefore, 5 through 9 can all be viewed as heaven. And dimensions 5 through 9 is where we will literally live for eternity and will continue to be these creator beings that live in total bliss. We're creating our ideal reality. We're building whatever we want, and it's literally heaven and literally bliss. It's amazing. What started as a fun fairy tale land and fun game of the third dimension was just hijacked, but it's okay. We're getting rid of that right now. So that's why when we're here, we're just certainly under the influence of this fourth dimension, and this whole fairy tale was hijacked. But once we get out of this, we go back to dimensions 5 through 9, living in complete bliss and creating our completely ideal, completely fun, blissful, amazing reality. We just have blinders on in the third dimension, so we don't see that truth. But it's all coming to light now and it's happening. We just need to raise our vibration and put out those high vibration emotions and really solidify and become steady in those high frequency bands so we become a match individually and become a match collectively so we can move into the fifth dimension. We just need to be a vibrational match. Like I mentioned, everything in the universe is energy, frequency, and vibration. And this high vibrational emotional state is what we call Christ consciousness or what we call enlightenment. Both the idea of Christ consciousness and enlightenment are archetypal themes. It's just this high vibrational energy being personified in different ways. You can view the phrase the return of Christ as a archetype or personification of our collective consciousness and individual consciousness raising its vibration and emotional frequency into the high vibrations of love and enlightenment. And Jesus, Buddha, and Mohammed all preached and shared this message of love and enlightenment. They were spreading this same message and spreading that we need to raise our frequency and just be in a place of love and enlightenment, but they use different words, and depending on the culture they shared this message in, these archetypes got personified into stories in different ways. When it all comes down to it, we all need to spread love, and we need to practice unconditional love. We need to realize people are doing the best they can. Everyone comes into this life with different situations. Some people could come into a bad situation and be raised in a certain way, and that really impacts your actions and what you do with your life. We shouldn't judge or condemn others because we don't realize what other people have gone through. And truly, I think we just need to always remember and always keep in mind that everyone's trying their best. And we really need to watch out for these dualistic thinking patterns and stay away from that black and white perspective. We need to realize that every situation has polarity and gradients of that gray, and we need to have empathy and sympathy and really try to understand where people are coming from when they might do something that we view as wrong. We need to have boundaries and don't need to hang out with people who are bringing us down. But even if we remove ourselves from a situation, do it with love and still wish the person well and send them love. Even if we don't realize it, just thinking good thoughts about a person and sending them love from afar does have an impact on them. So, as you can see, a huge, huge part of the fifth dimension is love, and love clearly spans every single dimension and is a huge important part of every dimension. And then one of the energetic expressions of love in the physical is sex. Sex is very sacred and hugely, hugely important. This is one of the ways this global elite running the third and fourth dimension has tried to cut us off from this fifth dimensional energy. They really try to grab us and attack us from all angles when it comes to sex. First, they use this fear based, controlling, manipulative aspect of religion to push all these different ideas, beliefs, and thoughts around sex. Some religions teach you that you must be married to have sex. Some say you should only have sex to procreate. And really, the list goes on and on. They say that having sex with yourself is a sin and that it's lust. They really just attack us from many angles. And we see this a lot that people raised in certain religions, they have a very weird relationship with sex. And being raised with these different ideas and different beliefs, it causes you later on to associate guilt with sex, which is really cutting off that fifth dimensional energy. But then the global elite, they're smart. They don't stop there. That's just one of the ways they can pigeonhole us. They also use Hollywood and celebrity culture to hijack this beautiful, sacred idea of sex. And they sexualize everything and cause this sacred energy of sex to be funneled into these truly dark and lustful versions of it. We see this in rap and pop music. Just take a look at any of the lyrics out on the Billboard Top 100. It just distorts this sacred view of sex and turns it into something flippant. And if you've been listening to all of this dark stuff coming out about Hollywood, it's pretty clear that they also use sex in very dark ways to harvest energy that way. And then using the fourth dimension thought forms, they've put out this collective program of hookup culture and making sex very casual and that you can just go have sex with whoever you want and it's fine. And they've really pushed this idea into the culture and it really took a hold. I certainly don't believe we need to be married to have sex, but we should view it through a sacred lens because it truly is an energetic exchange. And we should use it as an energetic exchange of love instead of tying it in with any of these other emotions. But we shouldn't view casual sex as something that quote unquote displeases God. We should just view it as practicing healthy things around this idea and keeping it sacred. It's just good management of our own energy, and it's better for us as individuals. In summary, this global elite really has just distorted the idea of sex and love, and in distorting that, it cuts off us pulling that amazing fifth dimensional energy into the third dimension. And if you personally have distorted beliefs or ideas about sex and love, then that's okay. Don't worry. Just do a little shadow work around this. And I've mentioned it before, but it really can be as easy as journaling about it. Maybe just explore your beliefs and your thoughts about it. If it's something that makes you feel guilty or embarrassed, write that down and then drill down into what has happened through your life that perhaps made you feel this way? And really just attaching a reason to something you're experiencing really opens the door up and takes the power away from it. So just do some self exploration here. Really drill down into where certain thoughts and ideas might stem from. And once you make that connection, just let it go. And I talk about this a lot too. It's great to do shadow work, but after we're done with it, we really need to truly let it go and move on and not make it part of our story. And one way you can tap into the fifth dimensional energies and pull that into your third dimension reality is meditating or thinking about those high frequency emotions like love and enlightenment. And one great way to do this is doing a gratitude journal. When I first heard about gratitude journaling, I really didn't understand the power of it until I tried it myself. When I write down different things I'm grateful for and really dive into it, like really truly sit there and feel it in your heart, the love you have for it, the gratitude you have for it, don't just quickly write down a list. Every item, sit in that and feel it in your heart, and you will truly feel your heart expand and feel so much energy just radiating from your heart. And it's this expansive, magnetic feeling that's kind of hard to explain, but once you feel it, you'll know what I'm talking about. So, sitting in that spot of love and gratitude by doing whatever makes you feel that way, but gratitude journaling is one way I've experienced this feeling, and meditation. Just do that and just sit in that spot and channel in and pull in that fifth dimensional love energy. And that will help you so much. And it's so powerful and so beautiful. Now I'll talk about the sixth dimension. And the sixth dimension is the realm of sacred geometry. This next part comes from the book I mentioned, The Alchemy of the Nine Dimensions. The sixth dimension is the realm of geometric forms that replicate as plants, animals, humans, and material objects in 3D, which is called morphogeneous. For example, the idea of cow exists in 6D, And then many cows replicate in 3D. It is also the home of the Ka, the human spirit body, which makes it possible for us to read the vibratory ranges that define our bodies, emotions, thoughts, and souls. Our Ka knows when to take energy in, when to block it, and when to mirror it back to its source. Yet, most people are unconscious of its activities. This remarkable, subtle energy body contains the memory of our initiations and therefore holds the records of the greatest potential for any person. Being in 3D makes Being in 3D, linear space and time, makes us dense and solid, which tends to make our Ka dormant. Most people are asleep throughout their whole lives. You can realize that your 6D form is real just by understanding the relationship between 6D and 3D. That last part was from the book I mentioned, but now I'll talk about how this is translated into the 3D. The ancient Egyptians used sacred geometry when it came to the pyramids. So they used this truth from the sixth dimension, the sacred geometry, when they built their pyramids so they could pull in energy from the sixth dimension. The pyramids in Egypt are pulling in 6D energy. And this is also what Nikola Tesla was doing when he was experimenting with free energy. It was actually using sacred geometry to pull in six dimensional energy. And then another example is when you see crystals in specific geometric shapes, specifically crystals that are in a geometric shape with a point on one side. What the crystal is doing, by the crystal being shaped in a specific geometric form, that's pulling in 6D energy, and then the crystal itself, being of the second dimension, is pulling in second dimensional energy as well. That's another reason why crystals are actually a very powerful tool to pull in, utilize, and manipulate energies. Labyrinths are also a way to pull in six dimensional energy. This was a well known thing in ancient and just in historic times, and this is why you might see labyrinths on these big estates. Basilica, temples, and cathedrals also use sacred geometry in their architecture to pull in six dimensional energy as well. Some of these architectural structures even have labyrinths built into the floor pattern in the tile. All of this is pulling in six dimensional energy. And I've mentioned this before, but to be harmonious and balanced living in the third dimension, we actually need to be pulling in energy of all 9 dimensions. So, how this relates to the sixth dimension is sacred geometry impacts our physical form, and it's connected to how our physical form is manifested in the healthiest way. We need to keep our body geometrically balanced to be healthy and to be pulling in this six dimensional energy. It's just how our body naturally and most healthily operates. So, one way we can keep our body healthy and balanced, and is a very six dimensional activity, is yoga. So, doing yoga in the third dimension, it's pulling in six dimensional energy because of that sacred geometry. And when we're putting our body in those specific forms, it's pulling down that six dimensional energy and really causing our body to be in harmony and balanced. So when you do yoga, you're literally pulling in and anchoring in six dimensional energies. And this is benefiting both you and all of humanity. And the way this global elite tries to stop us from harnessing this energy is a few ways, but one of it is religion vilifying yoga. Some religions preach that yoga is bad, and that's just crazy to me, but they do. And it's definitely just this elite control trying to spread this message so we don't pull in this sixth dimensional energy. Because when we pull in energy of all nine dimensions, we are more harmonious and balanced. And another thing that impacts the six dimensional energies we're pulling in is sitting at a desk all day, and think how rampant that is in our society. And like I mentioned, our society's manipulated and controlled by the fourth dimension. They're really also pushing this culture and importance of work and career. And that's leading to this whole outcome of people literally sitting at their desk all day. It's completely hijacking us channeling in this sixth dimensional energy. And when I talked about the second dimension, I talked about how there's energy portals and vortexes within Earth that have this potent energy. And I talked about how religions in the Roman Catholic Church, they know this truth, so they built the Vatican and other temples and places of worship on these energy portals, because then they can harness the second dimensional energy, that potent energy portal from the second dimension. They harness that, and they use sacred geometry within the architecture of the sixth dimension. They use both of those to harness that energy and use it for their own agenda of control. So, just in summary, if you want to be pulling in this sixth dimensional energy, you can do things like yoga. You can keep your body in good physical form, because when our body is healthy and balanced and operating in the proper geometrical shape of the human body, then it's pulling in that sixth dimensional energy. And then we can also use crystals in the proper way, since crystals will harness and pull in second dimensional energy and sixth dimensional if it's in specific geometric shapes. Just make sure you cleanse and clear your crystals by using sea salt and sunlight or moonlight. Now I'll move on to the seventh dimension. And the seventh dimension is the galactic highways of light. And this next part I'll read from the book I already mentioned. The seventh dimension is a realm of cosmic sound that generates the 6D geometric forms by vibrational resonance. Sound originates in the vibrational frequencies of the spinning, orbiting bodies in the universe. But what moves the bodies? The divine mind, or God, influences all the bodies in the universe by movement and measure. In the Milky Way, cosmic sound travels within the great 7D photon bands that structure the galaxy itself. Within the photon bands, 8D thought waves of light step down by octaves into lower frequency 7D sound waves. These waves circulate galactic energy into the spheric field of the Milky Way. Since sound waves are lower frequency than light waves, these light waves sing the divine mind. The great photon bands spin out of the galactic center, circle within the galactic sphere, and then return through the center, torqued by the galactic plane's powerful axial spin. This classic torus donut dynamic is generated by the great vertical axis that rises out of the galactic center at right angles to the galactic plane. Fountains of light rush through it and circulate, and these galactic highways of light carry 8D thought waves as high-frequency light. The divine mind permeates the whole galactic sphere, while the 7D zone is within the torus that holds the forms of the galactic plane. These singing bands generate parallel possibilities in 3D, or synchronicities, in which we humans can sense the intentions of the 8D divine mind. If we follow these leads, life becomes a dance in the higher dimensions. The photon band that is now activating Earth is a key part of the great Milky Way structure. If you're familiar with Christianity and the Bible states, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God. And I think this is a verse that has been misrepresented and misinterpreted, because what I think it's actually talking about is what I just said about how 8D thought waves of light, which is coming from the divine mind or God, those thought waves of light step down by octaves into lower frequency 7D sound waves. So when it says, in the beginning there was the Word and the Word was God, I believe it's talking about this process of it stepping down into sound waves, because sound waves would directly correlate to the Word because we speak the Word. The global elite has misrepresented this truth and used religion to do so. They tell us the truth that in the beginning there was the Word and the Word was God, but they misinterpret it on purpose because a lot of people translate this verse into thinking that what's written in the Bible is the Word and that's what we should follow without question. But then, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of misinterpretation in the Bible that was put there on purpose to control us. Sounds are vibrations and frequencies, which I talk about. Energy, vibration, frequency is the key to the universe. And you've probably seen those videos how different music and different sound creates different geometrical patterns. This is a living example of this concept. Sound is hugely, hugely important to us and impacts us in ways we don't even realize. And the global elite knows this, and that's why they are completely in charge of the music industry. And look what is coming out about the music industry right now. They manipulate and control us with these underlying frequencies in the music. And this goes beyond just song lyrics. It's the frequency we don't even realize is there or realize is impacting us. This is why it's so important to be really careful about what we're listening to and what we're consuming music-wise. We can get around this by listening to high vibrational independent artists. Listen to music that makes you feel really good, really expansive, really in your heart, and that just make you feel really happy and high vibe. Now I'll move on to the eighth dimension. The eighth dimension is the divine mind or God. And I'm going to read from that book again. The eighth dimension is the realm of the divine mind, light, that manifests throughout the visible light spectrum in 3D. The frequencies of 8D are actually much faster than the sound waves of 7D in the galactic photon bands, which is why mystics report being blinded by the light. The eighth dimension is the organizational field of light where the energetic spin dynamics of sacred geometry originate. These dynamics then step down by octaves into 7D sound before configuring as geometric light forms in 6D. The all-encompassing energetic realm of 8D is the reason we feel the love of God as a constant energy source in our lives. As energy moves down through the dimensions into the iron core crystal, each dimension becomes more dense in material. And as we move up through the dimensions to the galactic center, the planar fields become larger and more filled with space the higher up we go. And finally, their diameters become limited by the increasing number of creations within them. The first dimension is incredibly dense, while the 8D geometric forms hold the vertical axis. Even though 8D generates 7D sound that forms 6D geometric configurations that eventually flow down into 3D creations, the only way we can directly contact 8D is by entering the mind of the sun. Praying to the sun attunes indigenous people to solar wisdom, especially during the equinoxes and solstices. Sacred geometry and gravity are the forces that hold the planar fields on the vertical axis, while the vibrating strings in all matter hold the frequency ranges of the different dimensions by resonance. This is why most people intuitively know that the divine mind is real and omnipotent. Yet because of this awesome connectivity, it is easy and clever manipulators to use God as a program. I do not like the word God because the prevailing programs run by organized religion. So here I will define this 8D force simply as the light or the divine mind. To get a new understanding of 8D frequency ranges, we must first thoroughly understand the God poison program, which is used by the elite to control humanity. This program always describes the light in terms of 4D entities. Any dimensional description of the light that is lower than 8D is false. Personification of the light, such as Yahweh, blocks our access to the light. Defining the light in history mocks this great mind. No one knows anything about the light except what each one feels in the silent recesses of his or her heart. Such consciousness cannot be identified or described with words or concepts. It can only be experienced. The light is not the same as any god or mythical being that has ever interacted with any human, since historical gods operate at the 4D level. Their drama are like human dramas, such as the antics of the Greek god and Yahweh's wars. The light simply guides the quality of existence for all beings in all dimensions by emitting frequencies. These frequencies then become sound, which forms geometry that emulates worlds. The light shivers in ecstatic creation, which can be felt in nature. I feel the book really sums up that really well and sums up for me already. I don't even need to go into it on how the global elite hide this truth and distort this idea of God. And I talk about this a lot, and the book mentioned this, but truly the way to find God or the divine mind is going within and having your own experience with God. And I also love that it said you can feel God in nature. Now I'll move on to the ninth dimension. And when we get into these higher dimensions, they're harder and more complex to understand because they're farther away from the third dimension. That's why it's much easier for me just to read from this book because this book really puts it in terms better than I could explain. The ninth dimension is the black hole in the center of the Milky Way. The ninth dimension emanates out of the black hole in the center of the Milky Way galaxy. A black hole is an object formed in the collapse of a large star with such intense gravity that light cannot escape from it. This black hole is the source of time in the nine-dimensional vertical axis from Earth's iron core crystal to the center of the Milky Way. The black hole is a spinning gravitational nucleus that manifests itself in time waves. These waves were detected by the ancient Maya and are the basis of the mysterious Mayan calendar. These waves become creative agendas in our dimension that are felt by us as fascinations that attract our attention, such as comprehending our own evolution since time began. These time waves draw us into questing, seeking spirit in the material world. The mysterious 9D black hole is in the center of the galaxy, which continually receives the forces of creation generated out of Earth's core in the vertical axis. According to physics, everything in the universe is omnicentric, which means realities unfold from centers. Within our omnicentric evolutionary universe, reality unfolds from the beginning, always centered upon itself at each place of its existence. Just by being alive, we are in the geocentric center of this complex whole, which is expanding. The center we exist in connects us to everything because it's where the vertical axis of consciousness is located. Our nervous systems are designed to feel the cosmos via this axis. Since they know about this axis, the sacred tree, Native Americans always honor the 7 sacred directions when they pray to the 4 directions plus above, below, and heart, which is self. These prayers awaken omnicentric sensitivity in 3D, opening the doorways to the subtle worlds where the ancestors live. The great mystery is that our bodies and minds are now being activated by the full potency of the 9D black hole. This is happening because the plane of our solar system is intersecting the galactic plane. This is happening because the plane of our solar system intersecting with the galactic plane is in close aspect to the winter solstice sun, the galactic winter solstice. This brief alignment is causing an infusion of high frequency energy from the galactic center that is pulsing down into the vertical axis, like a tunnel or wormhole moving out of the black hole. What is left of Earth's biological intelligence in 2012 will pass through the black hole, a biological singularity. This winnowing of life that is valued by human love prepares us for the next stage of human evolution. The possibility of a biological singularity is a concept that is also being considered in science. We all live in a truly amazing moment in time. Earth scientists are entering our galaxy, which is important because realities do not actually exist unless they can be imagined or visualized. While many of us are being distracted by other stories being dished out by the media, astronomers and astrophysicists are quickly becoming the great adventurers in the Milky Way, the cosmonauts of the dark universe questing for the secrets of the universe. The galactic center exists in internal samadhi or bliss. High frequencies are slowly building in Earth, especially in 2D, which is transmuting humans in 3D into silica based instead of carbon based creatures. The galactic center pulses out nuclear waves of energy, and the 7D galactic information highways of light receive these pulsations. The pulsations are converted into sound waves detectable in our crown chakras, the ninth dimension of our own bodies. When we obtain samadhi by opening our crowns, we can detect these waves. As of 1998, samadhi waves have been increasing exponentially on Earth, which is radically altering nature. To higher dimensions, our world is becoming radiant, yet many humans are struggling with such pure high energy. Attempting to cope with this unseen force, many individuals and groups are becoming obsessed with apocalyptic beliefs. They fear the end of time. This response to the times is dysfunctional since the real need today is to value life and its powers of transmutation. So, I talked about how we really want to be able to tap into all of the 9 dimensions, tap into the energy of all 9 dimensions. And one way to comprehend the qualities of all 9 dimensions is by feeling them. And this is also from the book, starting now. Feelings are fourth through ninth dimensional fields that resonate in our nervous systems. When you contemplate the nature of the complex intelligence on the 9 dimensional vertical axis, including the potent black hole, eventually you can feel the cosmos. I love all of that so much. I love learning about the 9 dimensions and what their energy is all about. Just in summary, we really want to be tapping in to the energies of all 9 dimensions. And I talked about what they're all about and how we can do this. And I also talked about how this global elite's control of the fourth dimension is pushing agendas and narratives that send out these thought forms that prevent us from pulling in energies of all 9 dimensions. So let's get past this programming, get past this fourth dimensional control, and start living a life aligned with truth. And part of that truth is pulling in all of these energies of the 9 dimensions. Also, pulling in energy from all of the 9 dimensions will help us raise our vibration and help open our eyes up to the truth. And when we raise our vibration, like I talked about already, we need to raise our personal vibration and the vibration of the collective so we can shift Earth into the fifth dimension. Because once we shift into the fifth dimension, we can play in the fifth through ninth dimensions. We lose this illusion of separation. We lose the duality that we have on the third dimension. And then we're living a life of bliss in what we personify now as heaven. No one's coming to save us to say, you've been good, you've obeyed, you now get the golden ticket to heaven. That's just one of the archetypes and stories of control that has been fed to us by the fourth dimensional control. We're really in charge of ourselves here. We need to be in charge of raising our own vibration and spreading that love through all of humanity. That's why spreading love, not judging, and just living from a heart centered place is so, so important. And it will not only benefit you, but benefit all of humanity. If you're interested in this, you can read the book that I mentioned in this podcast. It's called The Alchemy of the Nine Dimensions, and it's by Barbara Handclough. And you can also listen to some of her interviews about the different dimensions on Gaia TV. Thank you so much. I hope this was as interesting to you as it is to me. You can follow my podcast for more episodes like this. I love to just dive into spirituality and the mysteries of the universe. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok at Fem and Flow. I hope you have a great day.